You know, I shared with you the other day, if you watched that particular YouTube video, that I'm going to be dealing with some very, very unique subject matter in the days ahead. So many of you love the prophetic teaching. You love to understand word studies from the Old Testament and New Testament. You love to understand prophetic cycles and patterns, and we're going to be dealing with that more. There was a stunning prophecy that took place in the year 1855 that I must share with you. I have been talking about this prophecy off and on for many, many years. So this is not something that just came across the desk or we just researched. As a matter of fact, it occurred 62 years before the rise of communism. And it occurred through a great man of God that you may or may not have heard of called Dr. Hudson Taylor, who ministered in China, who was a missionary to China. And it's been written concerning him, quote, "For 40 years the sun never rose on China, but that Hudson Taylor was on his knees praying for the salvation of the Chinese people." And that is documented in Hudson Taylor's Spiritual Secrets, a book which was printed by Moody Press. Now, in 1855, during a furlough to England, he had left China and was ministering and preaching, and this is one of the ways he would raise income for the mission support of China. He was preaching when suddenly he stopped. And as he stopped, he stood speechless for quite some time with his eyes closed. Those that were present wrote down what he said. And this is the exact quote. "I have just seen a vision. I saw in this vision a great war that will encompass the whole world. I saw this war recess and then start again, actually being two wars. After this, I saw much unrest and revolts that will affect many nations. I saw in some places spiritual awakenings." Now here's the interesting part. In Russia, now remember, it was called Russia in 1855. It became the Soviet Union from 1917 through for about 70 years or more. Then when communism fell, it became known as Russia again. Keep that in mind. It was Russia, then the Soviet Union, then again known as Russia. "I saw there will come a great, general, all-encompassing spiritual awakening, so great," he's speaking of Russia now, "that there could never be another like it. From Russia, I saw the awakening spread to many European countries. Then I saw an all-out awakening followed by the coming of Christ." And this is a quote that was from an original article titled "Spiritual Revival," published in Finland in the year 1945. So let's break down this prediction of Hudson Taylor that he saw in this vision. First of all, I want you to notice that he saw two wars separated by some time that would be like the continuation, or the second one would be a continuation of the first one. No doubt this was World War I and World War II, because in reality, if you'll study history, World War II was actually a continuation of World War I. So that part has come to pass. He then said, after the two wars, there will be revolts in many nations. Now we know this occurred. Look at America during the time of the Vietnam War, the war protests, the burning of the flags, the marches in Washington, D.C., and that's just one nation, the United States, not counting all the other nations in the Middle East, how there's been a Palestinian uprising against the Israelis in Israel. All of these types of things started happening after World War II, after Israel became a nation, after Jerusalem was reunited. So it's been taking place quite frequently. But then he starts saying that there will suddenly come an awakening in Russia. Now notice he did not know about the Soviet Union because it didn't exist, but it did exist for about 70 some years or so. Now it's called Russia again. Russia, Russia, Russia. You see it on the news consistently. And so he says that in Russia will come a great revival. Now, how could a revival come if Russia or the Soviet Union would remain under communism? The answer is that the communism had to break, the atheism had to begin to break, to permit Bibles to come in, churches to be built, and evangelistic meetings to be conducted. It is a fact that some of the greatest evangelistic meetings have happened in Russia since the fall of communism through the 1990s and on into the 2000s. And also don't forget that the Russian Jews have been permitted from the late 1980s into the 90s all the way to the present to return back to Israel, which is a major fulfillment of prophecies in the book of Isaiah and such prophecies as predicted by Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 16. What I find extremely interesting here is he said there will be this great all-out awakening. And then, I love this part right here, after the Russian revival, after the peak of it, in other words, then comes another all-out awakening. Now, my opinion, Joel chapter 2 is that awakening. This is the big one that happens, according to Joel chapter 2, quote, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. The great and terrible day of the Lord is the tribulation period of 7 years in length. There will be this great revival that's going to occur during the very time of the end. And that is followed by, what did Hudson see in the vision? The return of Christ. And literally, that's the prophetic order that I have been teaching from the beginning of my ministry for over 46 years. The revival, the final outpouring of the Spirit, the gospel going around the world, and then the end comes. That's what Jesus said in Matthew 24 and 14. So think about this, that for 70 years from 1917 to 1987, the Soviet Union existed. There was no open meetings. I mean, there was the Orthodox Church was recognized. The underground church was not recognized by the government. But now that revival has come, and I believe that we're headed toward that great outpouring that Joel mentioned in Joel chapter 2, before the great and terrible day of the Lord. So there are people who really prophetically hear things. They don't give their, a daily prophetic word. They literally pray and they fast and they hear things such as this prophecy that comes to pass in great detail. So I want to say this to you. It's very precarious times. It can be perilous times. We know that. But it's one of the greatest times to be alive, to see the prophetic word coming to pass and being able to be alive, such as myself, and be able to present to you and the world prophetic messages. And I also want to make mention of you that every year in the month of June, we have a major prophetic summit with great speakers. We have a huge fall camp meeting in the month of October, a great time together right here in Cleveland, Tennessee at the Omega Center International. And also, we travel from time to time and minister in different locations and places. But one of the things we love is being able to come to you over the Perry Stone YouTube channel. And so if you enjoy the channel, give it a thumbs up, and I would love for you to go ahead and subscribe. Now, when you say subscription, people think you pay money. There is no money paid. You pay nothing. All you do is hit subscription and the bell. And you know what that means? That means the moment we post something new, and you never know, if national news breaks out or some major prophetic event, I'm going to come on suddenly on YouTube and post some things probably live. I don't want you to miss that. So thank you. We have over 705,000 or so, or that was my count today. It could be way beyond that by now by the time you watch that. Some people may watch this months later. But always remember that don't cut it off when I finish talking. There is a special book that we've written, and we write books, and we have CDs and DVDs and things of that nature to advance your spiritual knowledge. So watch this, and thank you again for joining me. And don't forget to go to perrystone.org for resource information. My new book titled The Visions contains specific details of visions and revelations involving future, both national and international events, from visions and encounters that I have recorded in my private journal. I've waited for the right prophetic season to disclose these warnings and events. God's word states that if spiritual watchmen do not warn the people of the danger they see coming, the watchman will be held accountable for what happens to the people. After experiencing much inner conviction in my soul, I sensed it was the right time to pen what I and others have seen. Much of this book covers warning visions explaining what is coming and how to prepare. I've divided the visions into what was, what is, and what is to come. Here are some of the subjects I will cover in the book. Learn the 4 different types of spiritual visions. I explain ancient oracles exposing how leaders attempted to see the future. Visions of cities burning, both present and future, including New York City. My father's vision of a planned East Coast nuclear attack. Also, my recent visions concerning cremation ovens. I experienced a vision of a frightening assault on a public school that I want to share with you. I have for many years experienced tsunami visions, and I've decided to release that information and include the locations that I have seen in those visions. There is a vision of a nuclear power plant that initiates a stock market crash. There's a vision of empty cities and empty streets that I believe is linked to the recent pandemic and possibly another pandemic coming. The vision of the 10-mile radius bioweapons attack on London, England. And also, I've seen in 3 different visions a strong earthquake impacting the Midwest, especially the St. Louis area. I also talk about the strange vision of 3 tornadoes that I believe cost Hillary Clinton her political future. I share a vision revealing future attacks on individual Christians and churches. I also talk about when political leaders and their administrations lose divine favor with God. I have a section where I talk about 2024 and beyond, and I've included what I believe to be an interesting historical parallel about a possible Trump second term. The coming revival through the lens of a camera. One of my favorite chapters that's going to be very helpful to you is this: 10 rules and wisdom principles for surviving and thriving at the end. The book also has important instructions for the reader to follow. When you order this new book, I'm also including my 2 audio CD teaching, The Battle of the Two Marks, which exposes the future mark of the beast and explains the mystery of the seal of God, both which are alluded to in the book of Revelation. Get the new book and the audio CD now for your donation of $35 or more. Ask for offer VS 141. You can order at perrystone.org or by calling toll-free 1-888-21-BREAD or mail your order to Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. I hope every prophetic student, intercessor, and those interested to know what is ahead will take time to order this new spiritual resource. I've written this in the fear of the Lord, but I believe it's now the time to release the messages. A remnant is now waking up and preparing. What about you?
If you enjoyed this YouTube content, there's an important website you should know about: perrystone.org. Perrystone.org is an essential resource for the latest books, audiovisual presentations, and digital products from Perry Stone Ministries. Resources that cover the same kinds of topics discussed in the program you just watched. Stop in and see all that's available at perrystone.org.